Chapter 31. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A battle worth 10,000 Federation coins. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Seeing Mike's delighted expression, the king was slightly stunned. After a moment of silence, he asked, "My daughter is missing. Why are you so happy?" Mike coughed and said, "Nothing. I thought of something happy. Please continue." The king looked at Mike with a suspicious gaze, but he still continued, "Since half a month ago, I've sent many of my confidants to look for the princess, but all to no avail. The disappearance of the princess can't be known by others. This will cause a lot of bad effects, that's why I can't conduct a large-scale search." Hearing this, Mike nodded in understanding. If the citizens of the city knew that the princess was missing, they would definitely panic. If even the high and mighty princess could disappear, then it would not be strange for anyone in the entire City of Light to disappear. The security of the City of Light would immediately be suspected. At the same time, the citizens would also doubt the ability of their ruler, the king. The king continued, "So, I can only ask for the help of you adventurers. I hope that Lord God Slayer will accept this mission. Do you accept the mission, the missing princess?" A purple dialogue box. Mike's eyes lit up and he immediately agreed. He then asked, "May I ask, after searching for half a month, did you find any clues?" A normal mission, as long as there was a clue, the mission could be completed if one followed the clue. A purple mission, the reward must be very generous. This caused Mike to be very happy, but the king shook his head helplessly. "No clue. What?" Mike was stunned. "After half a month of search, there's still no clue. Isn't your efficiency too low?" Although he was shocked, Mike could only leave the palace. Since the king said that there was no clue, there was no point in staying. At this moment, the number of players in the City of Light had gradually increased. There were players everywhere, and they were either busy or shouting. "Is there a party that needs a priest? A level 11 priest is requesting to form a party. Selling green bracers. I just got a level 10 green bracer. The price is cheap. Is anyone going to fight monsters in the Elwyn Forest? Join us." It was already a tacit agreement that the area outside the palace was the players' square. Even the teachers in school had said that if they wanted to trade with other players, they should just go to the entrance of the palace. Mike paid no attention to these people. All he could think about was the mission. However, just because he paid no attention to them, it did not mean that others were not paying attention to him. As soon as Mike appeared, people immediately started to discuss. "Why did this person just come out from the palace? I don't know. I thought the palace didn't allow anyone to enter freely. Wow, he's already level 15. Wait, isn't he the God Slayer who was the first to kill a wild boss and clear the spider cave by himself? I heard that in the novice village, a player provoked him and the NPC in the village even helped him kill that player. Oh my god, he's that scary." Many people began to talk about Mike's actions, and they understood that this person was not someone that ordinary players like them could provoke. Once they saw Mike coming, everyone automatically made way for him, afraid to cause trouble. However, a swordsman player took the initiative to walk over and stopped Mike. "God Slayer, is it? I've heard so much about you." The swordsman stood in front of Mike with a provocative smile, but Mike did not notice him at all. He walked past him with his head lowered. With that, the swordsman felt a little embarrassed. His face showed a hint of redness as if he felt humiliated. "So many people are watching, it's too embarrassing. This God Slayer actually dared to ignore me. Stop. God Slayer." The swordsman turned around and shouted. Only then did Mike heard someone call him. He turned around with a puzzled face and asked, "Looking for me? What's the matter?" Having heard Mike's reply, the player called Sky Splitting Sword regained his previous expression and said provocatively, "I'm here to challenge you." Sky-splitting sword had a smug look on his face. There were at least dozens of people around him. Facing such a provocation, God Slayer would definitely not refuse him. This way, as long as he defeated him, he would be famous. However, something unexpected happened. "Sorry, I'm very busy. I don't have time," Mike replied. Then, he turned around and left. Suddenly, Sky-splitting sword felt even more embarrassed. He did not expect God Slayer to publicly refuse his challenge. No expert would do such a thing because it was too embarrassing. Sky-splitting sword did not give up. He asked, "Are you afraid?" Mike answered disapprovingly, "Yes, I'm afraid." He did not even turn his head. Sky-splitting sword's anger grew. The people around him naturally did not think that God Slayer was afraid. They only thought that God Slayer was looking down on him. "I'll bet 10,000 Federation coins with you," Sky-splitting sword shouted with all his might. Having heard this, Mike finally stopped and turned his head. His face revealed an interested smile. "You want to give me money?" "I agree." Chapter 32. You are listening at novelfull.audio. God Slayer vs. Sky-splitting sword translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. After he heard Mike's response, Sky-splitting sword was slightly stunned, but he quickly said, "No, no, no, I'm not giving you money, I'm challenging you. This is a bet." "A bet? Do you understand?" Mike's smile grew wider. "What's the difference between a bet and giving me money?" Sky-splitting sword was slightly confused before he came to his senses. God Slayer did not misheard him at all. What he meant was that betting against him was no different from giving him money. A definite win. He didn't even put me in his eyes. At the thought of this, an angry emotion emerged in Sky-splitting sword's heart. Ever since he entered school, all the teachers had been pampering him. Every teacher called him a genius. He had even activated his A.grade talent in today's talent test. After obtaining the A.grade talent, Sky-splitting sword felt that he was the chosen one. As he had unlocked the A.grade talent, the school had even given him a scholarship of 10,000 Federation coins. Who could have such a privilege? God Slayer, who was in front of him, had probably only killed a wild boss by luck. As for clearing the spider cave, he must have found some special method. It could not be related to his strength. Everyone was a new player who had entered Second World for the first time. How could anyone clear the spider cave by themselves? It had to be a special method or a loophole in the game. Therefore, Sky-splitting sword was certain that he would win. One was a player who relied on strength, and the other was a player who relied on luck and loopholes. There was no reason for him to lose. Thinking of this, Sky-splitting sword became confident again and took the initiative to say, "Whether I can win or not is not something that can be said with words. We will know only after we fight. If you think you're capable, let's go to the arena." "Sure." Mike smiled and took the lead to walk toward the arena. Sky-splitting sword followed immediately. The arena was a place for players to battle. A battle in the wild had a difference when compared to a battle in the arena. In a battle in the wild, if a player took the initiative to attack another player, that player's name would become a gray name. Moreover, whoever lost the battle would also lose their equipment. However, a battle in the arena had no such settings. Everyone was just battling, and there would be no punishments even if they died. Therefore, if people wanted a fair fight, they would fight in the arena, and others could watch as they pleased. Sometimes, the audience could even fill the arena to the brim. Although God Slayer and Sky-splitting sword's battle did not cause the arena to fill to the brim, there were still quite a number of people watching. Although most people were busy improving their strength, there were still a small number of people who wanted to satisfy their curiosity. Everyone wanted to see whether the famous God Slayer really lived up to his name. On the arena, the two stood on opposite sides. Mike smiled and said, "If you lose, you won't go back on your word, right? Sky-splitting sword refused to be outdone as he said, how can I lose? Do you think you can win me with your luck? Hearing this, Mike smiled and gave no response. There was no problem with calling it luck. After all, in the eyes of many people, it was considered lucky to be able to activate an SSS.grade talent. However, if one referred to it as ability, there would not be any problem either. Because he would definitely not lose in this battle. Both of them did not move because there was a transparent air wall in front of them. This air wall would only disappear after both parties had confirmed that they were ready. Sky-splitting sword raised his chin and said arrogantly, are you ready? Mike smiled and replied, okay. In the next moment, the air wall disappeared. Sky-splitting sword raised the long sword in his hand and rushed over. This was a level 10 green weapon with an 8-point attack power. Sky-splitting sword was very confident in himself. As he rushed toward Mike, he shouted, I only need 3 strikes to kill you. Soon, Sky-splitting sword had already rushed in front of Mike. He raised the long sword in his hand high and slashed down forcefully. First slash. This slash had released an active skill, Cleave. The effect was that there would be a 50% increase in damage for the next normal attack. Sky-splitting sword estimated that this slash could probably cut down half of God Slayer's HP. The sword carried an indomitable aura as it attacked Mike. However, just as it was about to hit Mike, Mike raised his left hand slightly. Ding! This sword was blocked. A number appeared above Mike's head, it was the number 0. This attack did not cause any damage to Mike. Similarly, a number also appeared above Sky-splitting sword's head, 0.10. Looking at this number, Mike smiled faintly. His smile had a hint of contempt. He did not expect Sky-splitting sword's attack power to be so low since he had been bragging for so long. Even if Mike did not block this attack, it could only deal 5 damage. It was no different from trash. Meanwhile, Sky-splitting sword was completely shocked. He pointed at Mike and shouted, You have the block skill. Mike did not answer. Instead, he answered him with his actions. He raised his sword and slashed. Chapter 33 You are listening at novelfull.audio. One hit, 800 damage, an unbelievable attack power. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Under everyone's gaze, Mike launched an attack. It looked ordinary, showed no might, and even made people feel as if it was weak and powerless. This was a normal attack. However, the number above Sky-splitting sword's head made everyone's eyes widen. 0.800. Sky-splitting sword was cut into 2 halves on the spot, and he turned into a ray of white light and disappeared. Instant kill. At this moment, the entire arena was dead silent. Everyone's faces were filled with shock. What's going on? What happened? Did God Slayer use some powerful skill? How did he deal 800 damage with a single strike? That was 800 damage. Everyone was looking at Mike. Mike, on the other hand, was smiling as he looked down the stage. A white light flashed, and Sky-splitting sword was teleported to the side of the stage. If he died in the arena, he would immediately revive by the stage without any losses. However, Sky-splitting sword had an extremely foul expression at this moment. Because he did not die without any losses. He had made a 10,000 Federation coins bet with God Slayer. This was the scholarship that he had just received today. He had not spent a single cent, yet he had already lost all of it in an instant. He simply could not understand how God Slayer could deal 800 damage. It was simply impossible. Looking at the complicated expression on Sky-splitting sword's face, Mike maintained his smile. Others might not know, but he knew it very well. 800 damage was not strange at all. His skills proved it all. Longsword Mastery, God. Level Passive Enhancement. Skillfully use longsword. Type weapons and increase the damage of longswords by 100%. Second. Hand mastery. Level passive enhancement. The extra hand could wear a weapon and have a 200% damage. No one noticed that Mike was holding a sword with his left hand. This was not obvious because some people in the world were left-handed. Since their dominant hand was their left hand, so it was normal for them to hold a weapon with their left hand. However, Mike's dominant hand was his right hand, and his extra hand was his left hand. Under the buff of the second. Hand mastery, the damage dealt by Mike's left hand was doubled. In addition to that, with the buff from longsword mastery, the damage was doubled again. Quadrupled. In other words, the damage dealt by Mike was originally 200, but after it quadrupled, it became 800. Of course, even if it was not quadrupled, a 200 damage was already very high. After all, the weapon in Mike's hand was an outstanding quality purple weapon. Could this level of damage be dealt by a level 15 player? No one could do it. Except for Mike. Looking at the stunned sky-splitting sword, Mike jumped off the stage and asked, "The 10,000 Federation coins you lost to me. When are you going to pay me?" Hearing this, sky-splitting sword panicked. He was not from a rich family. These 10,000 Federation coins were a huge sum of money for him and his family. What should he do? Should he really give it to Mike? Sky-splitting sword's heart was conflicted. In the end, he made a decision. He immediately went offline. When sky-splitting sword suddenly disappeared in front of everyone, the entire arena was in an uproar. Sky-splitting sword actually publicly went back on his word. One had to know if word were to spread out, sky-splitting sword would be blacklisted by everyone. Neither would anyone willingly team up nor trade with sky-splitting sword again. This was equivalent to ruining his future second world career. He would be looked down by everyone. However, he just had to do it. It was normal for an 18-year-old kid to not think so much. Mike whistled and left the arena. This was just a small matter to him. He had expected this outcome. If sky-splitting sword really paid, Mike would think highly of him. However, if sky-splitting sword reneged on his bet, Mike would not say anything. 10,000 Federation coins were not worth mentioning to the current Mike. It was just a small number. The audience was surprised to see that God Slayer had left so calmly. 10,000 Federation coins had been reneged on, but God Slayer isn't angry at all. He didn't even scold him. He whistled and left just like that. A normal person would have scolded him a few times and then post on the forum to expose sky-splitting sword for not keeping his word and cause his reputation to be tarnished, right? However, Mike did not seem to care. This was completely incomprehensible. One had to know that 10,000 Federation coins were enough to cover the living expenses of a family of 3 for 1 year. Instantly, many people started to make guesses. This God Slayer had to be a rich tycoon from a rich family. He was strong and his innate skill was at least an A. grade. Moreover, he was a rich person. The range had been narrowed down and many people made guesses regarding God Slayer's true identity. Some people even went on the forum to post. However, they would have never thought that. God Slayer was just a poor student who had a D. grade talent in school. At this time, the person in question, Mike, had already left the arena. He wanted to try his luck at the dyeing workshop. Perhaps he could enter this time. Chapter 34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The most difficult mission that no one had ever completed, The Legend of the Hero. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. When he arrived at the entrance of the dyeing mill, Mike subconsciously pushed with his hand. Then, his right hand passed through the gate of the dyeing mill. At this moment, Mike was slightly stunned. In fact, his behavior seemed very strange to others. The entrance design of the dyeing mill was hollow. There was no need to push the door, one could just walk in easily. However, Mike acted this way because if he walked in directly, he would hit a wall. He knew that there was an invisible air wall in the dyeing mill, which prevented Mike from entering. Except for this time, the air wall had disappeared, and Mike got in. With a smile on his face, Mike stepped into the dyeing mill. At the sight of Mike, Evelyn still had a disgusted expression as she asked, "What are you doing here?" It seemed as if there was no room for discussion, but Mike knew that they could hold a proper conversation. The fact that he was able to enter was the best proof. Mike smiled and said, "Miss Evelyn, I don't have any ill intentions. I'm just running errands for someone. Doesn't it seem appropriate for you to treat me like this?" Mike used a reasoning method to communicate. Although the NPCs in Second World would be affected by the system rules, such as relationships and camps. However, each of them was like a living person and had their own way of thinking. Therefore, Mike's words had caused Evelyn to waver. These words were indeed very reasonable. Mike was just doing things for others. Even if Evelyn felt disgusted, she should not take it out on Mike. It was very impolite. Then, Evelyn's tone softened a little, and said, "I'm sorry, Lord God Slayer, my attitude may have been a little extreme." Hearing this, Mike smiled again. "Very good, we can talk." Next, Mike took out the diary from his backpack and handed it to Evelyn. "This is something that the chief of the novice village's father wants to give to Lady Tiffany." Evelyn glanced at the diary and hesitated for a moment. She did not take it. Mike raised his eyebrows and smiled. "What's wrong? Shouldn't Lady Tiffany be the one who decides whether or not she wants to read this diary?" Mike's message was very clear. He wanted Evelyn to take the diary. Once she took it, his mission would be completed. However, Evelyn still refused to accept the diary. She sighed and said, "You're right. This should be left to my grandmother's decision, but..." At this point, she paced back and forth and hesitated for a moment before saying, "But my grandmother is not in the City of Light right now. Where is she then?" Mike asked with a smile. "Victory City." Mike nodded and left the dyeing mill. The next step of this quest was evident. He had to go to Hero City. However, Victory City was a level 30 main city. That was the main problem. In other words, Mike could not go there for the time being. Or rather, it was meaningless to go there. Mike vaguely sorted out his current situation. He could not complete the lover mission for the time being. He needed to go to Victory City to continue. For the time being, the missing princess mission could not be done either. He had no clues. Mike rubbed his hair. He suddenly felt that he had nothing to do. Level 15, what could he do? Mike thought for a long time and suddenly thought of an interesting mission. A mission that no one in the world had completed yet. Legend of the Hero. This mission that no one in the world had completed yet did not mean now. It referred to 30 years into the future before Mike transmigrated. No one had completed this mission before or in the next 30 years. Because this mission was too difficult. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the most difficult mission in the entire Second World. However, the mission reward was very generous. Legend had it that the reward given by this mission was enough to shock the entire Second World. When he thought of this mission, a smile appeared on Mike's face. In his previous life, let alone completing this mission, he did not even dare to think about it. If so many famous big shots could not complete it, how could he, inconspicuous dirt, do it? However, his previous life was in the past and now he had his current life. The current him was a player with an SSS.grade talent. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was the player with the most potential in the world. Of course, he was only the player with the most potential. If Mike were to fight against a high-level wizard in the big region, he would still be instantly killed. At the moment, he did not have any methods to deal with magic attacks. However, this was the new region. Everyone had to start from scratch. So far, it seemed that the strongest player in the new region was Mike. However, it was only for now. Mike had to make plans for the future. If he could complete Legend of the Hero, it might bring Mike a huge upgrade. After thinking about it, Mike made a decision. Let's go and do the Legend of the Hero mission. Chapter 35. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Surrounded by assassins, God Slayer 1 vs 15. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The City of Lights West Gate. Mike walked out of the city gate with a smile on his face. He looked completely defenseless. However, he was very clear that someone was secretly following him. As a 30-year-old player, it was not difficult for him to notice the person. Even if someone was following him, he still walked out of the city as if nothing had happened. After walking for a while, a group of people suddenly appeared around Mike and surrounded him. Mike smiled and glanced at them. They were all level 15. 1, 2, 3, 4. 14, 15. Mike stretched out his hand and counted the number of people around him one by one. 15 people. Excuse me, why are you looking for me? Mike still maintained a calm smile, as if he was not flustered at all. The leading sharpshooter named Cold Shot sneered and said, "Someone wants you dead." Oh. The smile on Mike's face was still present. He gently pulled out his long sword and held it in his left hand. In that case, what are you guys waiting for? Seeing this scene, the dozen or so people did not attack immediately. On one hand, they had to wait for their boss, Cold Shot, to give the order. On the other hand, Mike's reaction was too calm. It was as if he was not afraid of them at all. After all, they had a total of 15 people. 1 against 15, how could he be so calm? Cold Shot glanced at Mike and said in a low voice, "If you are willing to give US 10,000 Federation coins, I will let you go. How about it?" Mike smiled and said sarcastically, "You're assassins. Aren't you guys too unprofessional? You're actually willing to betray your employer for money." Cold Shot did not seem to mind Mike's sarcasm. He shrugged and said, "It's all about making money. We will listen to whoever pays us." The smile on Mike's face still remained. He asked indifferently, "So, you're blackmailing me now?" "No, no, no. Rather than blackmailing, we're cooperating." Cold Shot smiled. There was a hint of greed and confidence in his smile. "If you're willing to pay me an additional 10,000 Federation coins, we can also kill the person who had ordered us to kill you." At this point, he paused and added, "We will defeat him until he's back to level 1. Hearing this, Mike revealed a look of surprise. He clapped his hands and said, "That sounds pretty good. Being killed in Second World would deduct experience points. Normally, 10 deaths would result in losing 1 level. If the player was level 10, it meant that these people would have to kill him 100 times. 10,000 Federation coins was not expensive, but I'm sorry, there's no need. If you want to make a move, hurry up. If you don't, I'll leave." Mike clapped his hands and said suddenly. At this moment, the smile on Cold Shot's face stiffened. He had expected God Slayer to pay and not for their conversation to have ended so abruptly. Cold Shot's expression gradually turned ugly. He snorted coldly and said, "Don't tell me you think you can deal with 15 of us at the same time." This was already a blatant threat. However, Mike still maintained his calm appearance and smiled. "Why don't you try?" The atmosphere instantly turned cold. Blue veins popped out on Cold Shot's forehead. He gritted his teeth and squeezed out a few words. Kill him." After he gave the order, the surrounding 10 people rushed toward Mike at the same time. Among the other people, 2 mages and Cold Shot were responsible for long-range attacks. 1 priest was responsible for healing, and another knight was responsible for protecting the priest. Leaving a knight to protect the priest was a very normal arrangement. Under normal circumstances, in a battle, they would definitely attack the priest first. That was exactly what Mike did. Without saying anything, he immediately rushed toward Cold Shot and the others. Between them were two front-liners, a swordsman and a fighter. Naturally, the two of them would not easily let Mike go and proceeded to attack Mike one after another. However, ding! Ding! The poisonous sword in Mike's hand rose and blocked both of their attacks. At the same time, two numbers appeared above his head. 0.0. Meanwhile, the fighter and swordsman had lost a large chunk of their HP. Seeing this scene, the two of them were stunned. Mike took advantage of the moment and slipped through them, charging towards the 5 players behind Cold Shot. Quickly block him. Mages, quickly attack him. Cold Shot shouted as he fired a shot at Mike. Ding! The bullet was blocked by Mike, but it still did not cause any damage. Soon, the two mages' magic attacks arrived. A fireball and a frost arrow. One of them was a fire mage and the other was an ice mage. Both of these magic attacks hit Mike. However, the damage was very low. 0.25, 0.20. In the early stages, the player's magic resistance was relatively low, hence the damage dealt by mages was usually much higher than the physical class. Speaking of which, these two attacks were the first time that these assassins had dealt damage to Mike. Cold Shot was delighted and said excitedly, "That's the way, kill him." Though in the next moment, Mike had already rushed over. The knight raised the shield in his left hand nervously as he tried to protect the priest behind him. However, in the next second, he was stunned. Because Mike had no intention of attacking the priest. His target from beginning to end was the two mages. Chapter 36. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 1000 damage per slash. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Just as everyone thought that Mike was going to attack the priest, Mike charged at the ice mage. Hands raised, slash. 0.1000. A huge number appeared above the ice mage's head. The ice mage turned into white light instantly and resurrected. At this moment, the other 14 people stopped moving. 1000 damage. What happened? However, although they stopped, Mike did not. He slashed again at the fire mage next to him. 0.1000, the same damage, the same attack, the same ending. The fire mage turned into white light and resurrected. At this moment, the remaining people looked at Mike as if they were looking at a monster. Mike turned his head and looked at the knight, smiling. "Why are you protecting the priest? Do you think that after I attack, the priest will still have a chance to heal?" Hearing this, the knight was stunned. Indeed. In a normal team battle, the priest would be prioritized for protection, because as long as the priest was alive, he could heal the fighters continuously. However, would this be of any use to Mike? No. Because, no matter who it was, they would not be able to withstand Mike's left-hand attack. Instant kill with a slash, how could they heal? Mike held the knife in his left hand and slowly picked up the equipment dropped by the two mages. A pair of cloth shoes and a staff. Then, he looked at Cold Shot with a smile. Facing Mike's smile, Cold Shot shivered. In his eyes, Mike was like a demon. Fear appeared in Cold Shot's heart. He finally understood that God Slayer was not an existence that they could deal with. They were not on the same level. The thought of retreating appeared in Cold Shot's mind. However, it was too late. Swish. Another slash. Cold Shot's head and body were split into two. His entire head flew up high, and a large amount of blood spurted out from the broken part of his neck. In the next moment, Cold Shot's corpse turned into white light and disappeared. Meanwhile, the others had finally woken up from their shock. "Run!" The knight suddenly shouted, and the others immediately ran in all directions. Mike did chase after them. These people were just small characters, he did not care about them at all. He picked up the equipment dropped from Cold Shot, it was a revolver. Only then did Mike reveal a look of surprise. He did not expect this to be a level 10 blue weapon. Its attack power was 12 points. It was slightly stronger than the iron sword that Mike had obtained previously. As for the staff, it was a level 5 green weapon. It was not valuable, but he could keep it for now. After all, Mike could use all kinds of weapons. Before he had a better staff to replace it, Mike would not abandon the staff. He might be able to use it if he kept it. After dealing with these assassins, Mike left the place and continued his journey toward Hero City. Hero City, a level 20 main city for humans. This city was a small city and was incomparable to City of Light and Victory City. The City of Light was the first city that humans entered after leaving the Novice Village, it was also the king's base camp. Victory City was also a big city, and players after level 30 would usually stay there for a long time. However, Hero City was different. A level 20 main city was a transitional existence in the eyes of the players. However, this did not mean that Hero City did not have any special features. The most special feature of Hero City was the Legend of the Hero quest. Both the old and new players had heard of this quest. Even teachers in the school had mentioned it a few times because this quest was too famous. The hardest mission in Second World. At this time, Mike had already arrived at Hero City, and his level had reached level 20. He did not do anything on purpose. All he did was head toward the monster piles while he was on the way to Hero City. He was the exact opposite of other players. Other players would try their best to avoid monsters when they were on the road. However, Mike tried his best to find monsters. Anyway, all he had to do was walk through the monsters, and the monsters would commit suicide by attacking Mike. Moreover, Mike had now taken off all his equipment, leaving only his weapon. Because the equipment would increase Mike's defense, it would then reduce the amount of damage that the monsters could deal. This way, the damage of the rebound skill would also be reduced by a great deal, which would affect the efficiency of the monster's suicide. In the future, Mike would only wear the 3-piece vampiric set when fighting monsters who dealt magical damage. After entering Hero City, Mike went straight to the Hall of Heroes. At the entrance of the Hall of Heroes stood an officer named Heraus. In his memory, he always had a miserable look on his face. Mike came in front of Heraus with ease and took the initiative to ask, "Hello, I would like to ask if the human king of heroes is here." This was the secret code to start the Legend of the Hero mission. Chapter 37. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Black-Hearted Mysterious Shop Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Upon hearing Mike's words, Heraus raised his eyelids and said with a frown, "So it's the respected God Slayer, Sci. Are you looking for the King of Heroes, Gilgamesh?" Mike nodded with a smile. The Legend of the Hero mission was very simple. Rescue Gilgamesh, the human hero, was a secret that everyone knew, but no one could accomplish it. To be able to capture a human hero, one could imagine how difficult this mission was. Seeing Mike nod his head, Heraus continued, "Lord God Slayer, you may not know this, but Lord Gilgamesh is missing." Heraus's words were a little slurred. This was reasonable. After all, the disappearance of the King of Heroes was something that could not be spread around. He could only say that he was missing. However, this was the process of the mission. Mike was well aware of it, so he patiently talked to Heraus. Following this, Heraus said a lot of nonsense. For example, that the King of Heroes used to be so heroic, and he had accomplished many battle achievements before he earned the title of the King of Heroes. Also, Hero City used to be a happy city. There was a festive atmosphere everywhere, and everyone had smiles on their faces. After the King of Heroes disappeared, Hero City seemed to have been cursed. It was always cloudy, and everyone in the city had lost their smiles. Of course, Mike only treated these words as a plot requirement. In his memories, Hero City had always been like this. He had never seen a sunny day, and he had never seen any NPC who had a smile on their face. At the end of the conversation, Heraus finally said the key sentence, "Sigh, if only the King of Heroes could come back." Hearing this, Mike smiled and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with?" Hearing this, Heraus said, "If it's the God Slayer, he should be able to do it." This was a little different from Mike's memory. In Mike's memory, when players responded as he did, the answer they would get was, "How can a little adventurer like you help?" Adventurer was how NPCs addressed players. Perhaps because of the NPC's respectful attitude toward Mike, a small change had occurred, but overall, it did not have much of an impact. If you can find the King of Heroes, the entire Hero City will thank you. At this moment, a dialogue box appeared in front of Mike. It was golden. "Do you wish to accept the quest, Legend of the Hero?" Mike immediately chose yes. A hint of excitement appeared on Heraus's face, though he was mostly still frowning. "That's great. If you're willing to look for Lord King of Heroes, I can provide you with a clue. I heard that someone once saw Lord King of Heroes go to the swamp forest." Mike smiled and nodded, then left directly. There was no need to continue the conversation. The next step was obvious to everyone in Second World. That was to go to the swamp forest dungeon. The requirements were very strict. The player could not suffer any damage throughout the entire journey. For other players, this was a huge challenge. However, for Mike, it was not difficult at all. If one had to compare, going to the kindergarten 3 streets away to pick up his aunt's child was probably more difficult. However, after leaving the Hall of Heroes, Mike did not directly head toward the swamp forest. He wanted to go to a special place first, the mysterious shop. The mysterious shop often sold some unusual things. However, this was not a place that ordinary people could go. If someone were to enter the shop and took a look at the list, a ticket would be required. Payments were necessary regardless of whether they were making a purchase or not. Hence, if one was not rich, they would rarely visit the shop. It was too expensive. Although Mike had never been here before, he was still a 30-year-old gamer. Thus, he was familiar with the location of the mysterious shop. It was a rundown grocery store in the corner of Hero City. Looking at this rundown grocery store, Mike's heart was filled with waves of emotions. In his previous life, he had passed by this place countless times, but he had never thought of going in to take a look. Such a high-consumption place was never something he could afford. However, in this life, he could. Mike went forward and knocked on the door, and an old voice came from inside, "Who are you looking for?" Mike smiled and replied, "I'm here to take a look at the goods." This was the secret code of the mysterious shop, and it was also a secret known by everyone in Second World. Once this was said, you would have to pay for the ticket to enter, and then you would be able to see the real goods in the mysterious shop. If you went in directly without saying the secret code, you would only be able to buy ordinary goods like life potion, and it was of a low level. It fit the image of a rundown grocery store very well. After Mike said this, a dialogue box immediately appeared in front of him. "Please pay 1 gold coin for the ticket." Chapter 38. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Unexpected gain. Passive skill, Swift Steps Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. When he saw the dialogue box, the corner of Mike's eyes twitched twice. This is 2F** King Evil, isn't it? It cost 1 gold coin just to go in and take a look. This price was indeed expensive, but Mike still paid for it. At the same time, he posted on the forum again, buying game coins. After he entered the mysterious shop, Mike subconsciously took in the surrounding environment. After all, it was his first time entering the shop. However, after looking at it, Mike found at the mysterious shop gave him an old and shabby feeling. Dust and spider webs covered the shop. The display shelves beside the wall were pretty much empty. One of the boards was even broken, yet the boss was not even bothered to fix it. At this moment, the stooped black-hearted businessman was standing behind the counter. He smiled sinisterly and said, "You're here to buy something, right?" Mike nodded. Then, a list appeared in front of him. The words of the black-hearted businessman rang by his ears, "Since you want to buy something, then pick something. Maybe you can find something you like." Mike ignored him and was focused on looking at the items in front of him. As he looked at them, Mike frowned. The items here were indeed much more expensive than the items sold outside. Take the equipment for example. A level 20 green equipment here was actually priced at 100 gold coins. One had to know that the amount paid by super rich to buy Mike's equipment was already very high. 5 green equipment should only be priced at 2,000 Federation coins. Moreover, Mike spent 10,000 Federation coins to buy 100 gold coins. It was simply a sky-high price. However, Mike did not choose to leave immediately. It cost him a lot of money to enter the shop. He had to look carefully. Perhaps there would be something suitable for him. Subconsciously, Mike was feeling a little regretful. He wished he had sold more equipment to super rich. Judging by the amount of money Mike had, he could probably only afford 1 or 2 items from the mysterious shop. Moreover, this was after he had spent all his Federation coins to purchase game coins. As he flipped through the list, Mike could not bear to look at it anymore. Ednel.co There were no good items. They were all trash and expensive. Everyone said that the old man in the mysterious shop was a black-hearted businessman. It was indeed true. Just as he was about to close the list in front of him, Mike suddenly glanced at the corner of his eye and saw an indistinct item. Swift steps, passive. Movement speed increases by 1%. Price: 50 gold coins. When he saw this skill book, Mike's eyes lit up. This was something that was suitable for him. "Boss, I want to buy this." Mike immediately decided. When the black-hearted merchant saw the skill book that Mike had chosen, he slightly frowned and said, "Lord Godslayer actually wants to buy such a useless skill." Hearing this, Mike rolled his eyes. "You know this skill is F*King useless, yet you dare to sell it at such an expensive price." However, the black-hearted merchant may have said that, but his words meant otherwise, as he still immediately agreed to the deal. This skill book was sold for 50 gold coins, so the black-hearted merchant definitely made a huge profit. The market price was at most 1 gold coin, or even less than 1 gold coin. However, the market price was the market price. Mike could not just buy passive skills on a large scale, as this would cause others to suspect that his innate skill was related to being passive. He would rather spend more money to hide his trump card. This was common knowledge in Second World. After the transaction was successful, the gold coins in Mike's backpack had almost been emptied. These 50 gold coins were only obtained after he bought them on the forum. Otherwise, how could an ordinary player have so many gold coins on their first day in the new region? After buying this skill, Mike looked through the entire list of goods. After he confirmed that there were no other skill books, Mike left. The trip to the mysterious shop cost 51 gold coins, which was equivalent to 5,100 Federation coins. This was simply unimaginable for ordinary players. However, Mike was in a great mood at this moment. Because his skill list had another passive skill. Swift steps, God.tier passive enhancement, increased movement speed by 100%. With this skill, Mike would not have to face the same situation that had happened in the novice village. Chasing after 4 players and not being able to catch up because of his movement speed was quite unpleasant. The fact that he was unable to catch up to the 4 players he was chasing because of his slow movement speed was rather unpleasant. In the future, if anyone provoked him again, that person would not be able to escape anymore. With a happy mood, Mike left Hero City and headed straight for Swamp Forest. After his movement speed was doubled, Mike's travel speed was greatly accelerated. Originally, it would take 40 minutes to get from Hero City to the Swamp Forest, but Mike only took 30 minutes to get there. As for why it was not 15 minutes, it was because Mike chose a path with monsters along the way. In order to prevent the monsters from falling behind, Mike slowed down his pace. When he arrived at the entrance of the Swamp Forest dungeon, Mike had already reached level 21. There was probably no other player in the entire second world who could level up as fast as Mike. There was also no other player who could fight monsters like Mike. As long as he walked among the monsters and took a beating, the monsters would commit suicide. Looking at the forest in front of him, Mike smiled and walked in. Entering the Swamp Forest dungeon. Chapter 39. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Special Dungeon, Swamp Forest Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. This dungeon actually had some specialties. It did not give players a feeling where they had entered a dungeon at all. They could just walk straight into it. The scene inside was no different from what one could see from the outside. It was just a forest with purple ground. Of course, the opposite of this purple ground was not normal ground, but a swamp. If he walked on this ground, he could fall into a hidden swamp at any time. Once he fell in, he had to get out as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would die. However, this posed no threat to Mike. Before he obtained swift steps, Mike did not think that this task would be difficult for him. Now that he had doubled his movement speed, it was even easier. Mike took a few tentative steps forward and suddenly felt the ground under his feet soften. Then, he stopped and looked at his feet with an interested smile. He saw that he was sinking bit by bit. In a short while, the area below his knees had sunk into the ground. At the same time, Mike looked at his status bar and saw that there was an additional 50% debuff of movement speed. However, average people would only be half as fast here. However, Mike had doubled the movement speed, so he was no different from the normal speed. Mike lifted his feet and walked forward. He felt as if he was walking in water. He could feel resistance, but his speed was still the same as normal speed. The design of this swamp was that as long as you walked forward, your body would gradually float. Hence, Mike quickly walked out of the swamp and returned his feet on the ground. Looking back at the swamp behind him, which was no different from normal ground, Mike actually found this setting pretty interesting. If it were any other player, they probably would not be smiling right now because movement speed often affected the operation. Moreover, attacks that were dodgeable would become unavoidable. However, Mike did not have this kind of pressure, so he found it interesting. As he continued to walk forward, a few monsters that looked like mud suddenly appeared from the ground in front of him. These monsters all had the same name on their heads, swamp monsters. These were level 20 monsters, and their slow speed and disgusting appearance were their characteristics. Mike smiled and pulled out his poisonous sword before walking forward. This mission was very difficult for players. It was not difficult to deal with these swamp monsters, though it was difficult to deal with them in the swamp. This was because once a player accidentally walked into the swamp, their movement speed would slow down, and they would need to keep walking forward. If they stopped moving, their entire body would quickly sink, and they would die. This was already difficult enough, but the most difficult part of the quest was the requirement where players could not receive any damage. This was also the reason why no one had been able to complete this quest for so many years. Something worth mentioning was that some people had thought of increasing their levels prior to completing this quest. Then, when they encountered the monsters, they could instantly kill them with one move. With that, they would not receive any damage. However, someone had tried this idea and it did not work. The Swamp Forest dungeon was actually not a normal dungeon, but a special dungeon. If the players did not accept the Legend of the Hero quest, then the Swamp Forest was just a part of the map. The players could enter and leave as they pleased. The monsters here would only be level 20 normal monsters. However, after the legend of the hero quest was accepted, entering the swamp forest was equivalent to entering a dungeon. This was also why it felt as if one had entered a private space after entering the swamp forest. Since this was a special dungeon, the calculation of the game difficulty would definitely be different. If one were to do the Legend of the Hero mission at level 20, then the difficulty would be calculated at level 20. Similarly, if one attempted the Legend of the Hero mission at level 200, the difficulty would be calculated at level 200. Moreover, if one were to do this mission at level 20, the difficulty might even be above a normal level 30 mission. Then, one could imagine how difficult level 200 would be. Therefore, the earlier he completed this mission, the better. Some players who had accidentally exceeded level 20 ended up killing themselves just for the sake of completing this mission. However, these all applied to other people. To Mike, he was confident that he could complete this mission regardless of how level. Ding! One of the swamp monsters slowly attacked Mike, but it was blocked by the poisonous sword in Mike's hand. Point 0, the block was successful and did not cause any damage. This was Mike's biggest advantage. He passed the level unscathed, and there was no pressure at all. In the swamp forest, Mike walked around casually, and he did not even bother to take the initiative to attack these monsters. As long as he took a beating, the monsters would kill themselves, so all Mike needed to do was walk forward. Soon, Mike saw a figure sitting under a tree. A smile appeared on Mike's face. That figure was the key to the mission. Chapter 40. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The difficulty of the Legends of Heroes. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Mike smiled as he walked toward the person on the ground. In order to increase his speed, Mike no longer waited for these monsters to attack him. He attacked as he walked. .1000, .1000, .1000, numbers appeared above the heads of the surrounding monsters. None of the monsters could even withstand a normal attack from Mike. Very quickly, the surrounding monsters had been cleared out. Meanwhile, Mike's HP was still full. He was unharmed. Mike quickly stepped forward and came to the tree in front of him. When he got closer, he realized that this person was already dead. It was a corpse. Mike pursed his lips and remained silent. In his previous life, Mike had also attempted the Legend of the Hero quest, but he had never progressed this far. He had failed at the first batch of swamp monsters that appeared in the outermost area of the swamp forest. A large number of people were directly eliminated as the quest's requirement was to not receive any damages. Of course, there were also experts who had made it this far, so Mike knew that he would meet a person here. Moreover, he also knew that this was where the clue for the second half of the mission would be. However, he only knew the facts, he did not know the specific details. Therefore, he could only bend down and search the corpse in front of him. Although the corpse was not rotten, it still felt really strange to do such a thing. Soon, Mike found a letter in the corpse's arms. This was obviously a mission clue. Without any hesitation, Mike opened the letter. A sentence was clearly written on the letter. "I'm tied up in the swamp cave, please send someone to help me." It was a simple sentence, and the paper even had some bloodstains. It showed how critical the situation was. In that case, it made sense why the body would appear here. It was likely that the soldier who came out to deliver the letter had died on the way, but it was strange that the body had not rotted. However, Mike was not bothered by it. He only wanted to complete the mission. Looking around, Mike noticed that there was an area in front that was completely different from other places. Although this place was a swamp, its name was Swamp Forest. Since it was called a forest, trees should be present. However, the area in front of him was actually a completely empty space without any trees. There must be a special reason for it. Mike immediately walked toward the empty space. As soon as he stepped on it, his entire body sank at an abnormal speed. Moreover, even if Mike wanted to move forward, he could not move at all. Soon, his whole body sank into the swamp. Silence was once again returned to the swamp forest. When he opened his eyes, Mike found himself lying in a dimly lit cave. He had no memory of how he ended up lying here. The reason why he could still vaguely see his surroundings was because of the dimly lit mushrooms on the surrounding stone walls. Mike pulled up the game system and checked the time. He was not unconscious. It seemed that the loss of consciousness was just a plot of the mission. Mike stood up and looked at his surroundings. In a direction far away from him, there seemed to be some light. This light was different from the dim light emitted by the surrounding mushrooms. It was an obvious flame. It seemed that Mike had to go in that direction. After confirming the direction, Mike lifted his foot and walked forward. However, in the next second, he subconsciously raised his hand. Ding! Mike was slightly stunned. He was actually attacked at this time. If not for his block skill, he would have failed the quest. Thinking of this, Mike was once again shocked. This quest was indeed very difficult. No wonder everyone said that this was the most difficult quest in Second World. As Mike walked forward, his left hand kept rising, making clanking sounds. However, his HP had never been damaged in the slightest. Mike figured that the normal way to play this quest was to hold the torch in one hand and the weapon in the other. He had to be careful throughout his walk. From the looks of it, it was almost impossible for a two-handed weapon player to complete this quest. This kind of quest was simply too abnormal. With a face full of concern, Mike easily passed through the long tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, which was where the light shone, was a brick tunnel. Torches were hung at equal distance from each other along the sides of the tunnel, so there was absolutely no problem with the lighting. Looking at the tunnel in front of him, Mike narrowed his eyes and revealed a playful smile. There were rows of sculptures on both sides of the tunnel, and from the looks of it, it felt quite oppressive. This design was very obvious. As long as the player was within a certain range, these sculptures would suddenly come to life and attack the player. According to the design of this mission, ordinary players would probably need to defeat these sculptures one by one. However, was Mike an ordinary player? The answer was obvious, no. He actually charged straight forward. Every time he passed by a statue, the statue would tremble slightly and then stand up. When Mike came to the end of the tunnel behind him was already filled with monsters. Envied Mike smiled slightly. It's too slow to fight one by one. It'll be easier if you attack together.